Hello and welcome back to Russ's Movie Corner. My name is Russ, and as you can see, I'm sitting in front of my movie corner. I'm wearing my Armor of God t-shirt, and I've got my Bible. Epic miniseries sitting right here, just to my right. And so, today I'm going to come back to this video called Noah's Ark, the story that disproves the entire Bible. I have two previous sections on this, so if you haven't seen part one, you're probably going to want to go check that out. Because I read the story of Noah's Ark from the Bible and how that fits in, and then how that works, how that fits into this guy's argument, and how he has completely sidestepped a lot of things in his pursuit of being able to say that this one story in the Bible, Noah's Ark, disproves the entire Bible, because there's no way that one story could completely change everything about our, because it would have to change our entire perception of reality to believe in, which, honestly, and I'll put down some other resources in this video description. I'll have some different resources in the video description for you, where I'll have like some answers in Genesis, and I'll have some different things that will kind of talk about Noah's flood and how we see evidence of that flood around the world today. Things like trees being stuck in upright position across many multiple layers of soil that are supposedly, like, the bottom layer is millions of years old, whereas the top layer is only thousands of years old. And how could a tree have, petrified tree, been stuck upright in all of those layers if they were truly that many years old? Because the tree would have fallen down by then, right? I mean, we've already seen, how trees fall down. Which, thinking of that joke, even if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound. And yes, it does. Sound is an energy. Okay, it's a wave. It travels. Even if there's nothing around to record that, it still makes the sound. So, just saying. But this gentleman here, he is kind of pushing this narrative of, he read the story and then read this one quote from an argument that one of his family members gave him when he started questioning the story of Noah's Ark, that said, basically said, we know the story of Noah's Ark is true because the Bible's true, because the Bible tells it so, and he was like, oh, that's circular reasoning. That'd be like saying that if Allah, or, that Muhammad was the prophet of the one true God because, the Quran says it so. And I'm like, well, that's because that's what it says. If you go ask an Islamic person today, any Islamic person, that if they believe that Muhammad was the one true prophet of Allah, what are they going to tell you? Yes. And if you say, how do you know that? They're going to say, well, because my holy book, the Holy Quran, tells me so. Duh. But we know from various places around the world that this book is entirely historically accurate. Okay? That there are many stories that are proven archaeologically, that are proven historically, and that are proven geologically. So there's a lot there. And we're going to get a little bit more into that now. I'm going to try to get through a little bit more of this video in this one, because I know I'm only like 5 minutes into it, but I needed to kind of talk about his chart that was in the Watchtower publication for Jehovah's Witnesses. I needed to kind of talk about that chart and talk about the different cultures and the different things, and why would a tribe in the middle of the desert have a very similar flood story to a tribe in Canada, on the eastern coast of Canada, which is the same as a tribe on the southwestern coast of Australia. Okay? Why would they have similar stories if that wasn't a true story to begin with? Okay? And why would you know, why would the Epic of Gilgamesh have almost the exact same story as the Bible? And it's one of the earliest flood legends ever made. I mean, come on, dude. Seriously. I mean, it had to have stemmed from somewhere. And like I was saying before, as you get out and out and out and out and out in concentric circles, and you start to get away from that which the story was originally, and your worldview starts to change, and you start to worship other things, your view of the world is going to get distorted. And it's going to sound like a legend. You're going to have the old person standing there telling the story, and some young buck like this is going to be sitting there going, "Oh, that's not true." "Yes, it is, child." "No, it's not. You don't know the story." How is that child going to tell the story differently than that elder? Tell me that. But we know it's there. So, come on, dude. Start using your brain a little bit.
6 books, front to back. 2 DVDs, and do extensive research online, analysing the best evidence people put forward for the flood happening.
I'm going to say he didn't actually really read all of that stuff and really absorb it if it shook his faith this much.
From woolly mammoths frozen in time, to the Genesis flood being revealed in Chinese picture symbols, and remnants of marine life being found near the summit of some of the world's tallest mountains. Time and time again, the recurring problem that I encountered with these pieces of apparent evidence was the fact that they couldn't be scientifically reinforced as fact. They were simply speculation and assertions. But just when I thought that I'd exhausted all lines of evidence, I was about to hear of something which, if true, would be a complete game changer. Because when I went to see a couple in the family, and I told them that the story of Noah's Ark was one of the key reasons as to why I was having doubts in my faith, they looked at me completely bemused and they said, Whoa, Has, what do you mean? They have found Noah's Ark. I'm not sure what they'd been looking at, but it certainly wasn't JW.org. Even the website says that numerous expeditions have led to interesting claims, but not to conclusive proof. And that despite many efforts, though, the search for Noah's Ark is ongoing. Reading the...
Okay, so I'm going to post a video that I just watched down in the description, and it'll be there in the first video as well, because I'm just going to basically make just a bunch of things, a list of things that I'm going to put in the description. I'm just going to basically copy and paste into the description box of each video here in this series. And one of these will actually be the actual formation known as Noah's Ark. The reason why people dispute Noah's Ark is because there were a lot of people who say that it was just a natural formation and anything they see inside is just caves, blah, blah, blah. But this video that I saw has... They actually go into these caves and they're actually walking around and they're seeing chambers, little cells off to the side that are too symmetrical to be natural, okay? And they're actually going inside with cameras and they're documenting things. Now, when they first discovered this shape on the mountain, I will say it just looks like a teardrop, it looks like a boat-shaped rock in the middle of nowhere, okay? And my own skepticism of them saying, because, I mean, we had been told for years that nobody knows where Noah's Ark went down, okay? There's even some dispute about when the guys came out of Egypt and they went down into the Sinai. Did they go down to the south? Did they come up through the north? How did they go around? Where did they go? All this kind of stuff. There's a lot of speculation where they went and how they did things. But they have aerial photographs of this region from years and years ago, because we used to fly around this region to go spy on the Soviets in the Balkans, okay? We used to take spy planes, we used to take aerial photographs, and they used to photograph this one particular region where Mount Ararat is located, okay? And it wasn't until they had an earthquake in the region, some number of years ago, that they started noticing that there was this one shape on the side of this mountain. And I'll put down, like I said, in the description, I'll put down some links to some of the different locations, because it's quite interesting to me when you see what it looks like from the outside. You kind of go, yeah, that does actually kind of look like a vessel. And I mean, if it was truly stuck in the mud, and if it had kind of bogged itself down in the mud enough that when Noah opened the door, that, you know, and let all the animals out, if he didn't, I mean, he wouldn't have been able to move it. They've also found anchor stones and various other things in this video. We'll talk about it, and I'll get more on that here in a second. But they know that from the general shape and size of this boat, that it is about the size of Noah's Ark. Okay, it may not be the full size, because the boat wouldn't have been built like a box. Okay, the boat actually would have had a sort of a keel on it, in the front and in the back, because if it was built like a box, even if it had the anchor stones on it, there would have been too much torque. If it had more of a vessel shape to it, which they would have known from shipbuilding at that time, they would have known how to build certain like canoes and certain types of things, that it would have, you know, allowed for more twisting and turning in the sea. And so they know that this formation is about the size of Noah's Ark, and they've actually discovered that there's actual caves, there's actual openings, cave openings that go down inside, and they've actually taken a bunch of different pictures of the interior of this. And like I said, it's not just a natural cave system. Like, there's actual like sections in this, okay? And this is now all coming to light now. This was not, I mean, I don't know when these books that he's holding up, I don't know when these books were written. So I can't attest to say, hey, by the way, you know, this guy, you know, did this, or you know, this happened at this time. I don't know when those books were written. So I don't know. And at that time, it may have been that it was still under dispute. Many people thought it was just a natural formation. In fact, I've seen so many atheists that say that's not actual Noah's Ark, that's just a rock formation. They've never been there. Okay? I trust the people that have actually been up there and actually measured the damn thing and actually know what it looks like and actually know what it does. Okay? And have actually radared it and actually done things with it, that they know more about that than some atheist on the internet going, that's not true. Okay? Start pulling out the Ray William Johnson troll again.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Okay? Because they just don't see it. And you know what? I think I'm probably going to use the old Ray William Johnson line. 2 camels in a tiny car. I'm joking. But when you see the formation, you will go, yeah, that actually does kind of look like a boat. And like I said, the video that I have shows a lot about the various... There's a couple different videos that I'll show, and one of them is, I think it's called like the most convincing video about Noah's flood in existence, and it talks about how the boat could have taken the torque and how it could have, you know, survived on the seas. And then there was another one that that actually is about this formation and how they've gone down inside of caves and how they've taken pictures of it. So I'll post those down in the comments. Go down and take a look at them, and we'll go from there.
These books, doing research online, and talking to family members had only raised more questions than it had answered. And so I decided it was time to stop desperately attempting to validate the story It was time to allow my own mind to address the questions that had been building up for the last couple of months, and to reread the biblical account of the flood through the lens of skepticism. After Noah reached 500 years of age, he became father to Shem, Ham, and Japheth. This was the first red flag that I encountered, and it's before the flood story even begins. If I wanted to maintain my belief that this story was true, I'd also have to believe that in a world before contraception, in a world in which Noah and his wife probably got married as soon as their bodies were physically able to, they were having intimate moments for around 480 years without bearing a child. And then bam, there's 3 all at once. Mentally that didn't quite sit right, didn't make sense. And so I asked a family member that I respected for their opinion. They said that because Noah was closer to Adam's perfection, he probably had greater control of his reproductive powers. You know when you hear something so bizarre and so wacky that you just need to take a step back to mentally process it? I think what they were saying was that Noah almost used the force on his sperm to make sure that they didn't reach the egg and fertilize it.
Okay, so Noah was 500 years old when he had his 3 sons. Number 1, the Bible doesn't say when Noah got married, okay? As far as I know. And I could look again real quick. And let me see here. Methuselah. Yeah, so it just says that Methuselah lived 782 years after the birth of Lamech and was the father of other sons and daughters. Thus Methuselah lived altogether 969 years, and then he died. After living 182 years, Lamech had a son born to him, and called his name Noah, saying, "This is the one, after our work and the labor of our hands, to bring us consolation from the very soil which the Lord cursed." Lamech lived 595 years after the birth of Noah, and was the father of other sons and daughters. Thus Lamech lived altogether 777 years, and then he died. After Noah had become 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So it doesn't say when Noah got married. Noah could have gotten married at 500 years old. Noah could have gotten married at 480 years old. You don't know. It just says Noah was 500 years old when he had his 3 sons. Okay? You're attaching our 20th century, 21st century meaning of, most people hit puberty, live to be, we hit our sexual prime at, 20, 25. So that's probably when he got married. Another thing is that if you've listened to Kent Hovind speak, which if you truly are a Jehovah's Witness, you probably have not heard him speak, but he has a theory as to the fact that, he calls it the Hovind theory, that there was about 3 fingers thick of ice around the entire world that would have sheltered the world and would have trapped in the oxygen, which would have made people live a lot longer. Because he says if you've ever been inside of a hyperbaric chamber and you've ever lived, or you've ever, done that, you've upped that oxygen concentration in your body so much that you just you go, I'm gonna run, and the more that you up the oxygen concentration, the better and faster your cells heal and everything like that. The funny thing is, we live in an atmosphere that is about 70 to 78% nitrogen, okay? And we don't breathe nitrogen. We breathe oxygen. There's only about anywhere between 20 and 14% oxygen, okay? So, yeah, our air is very poisonous to us, okay? And our atmosphere doesn't filter out a lot of the toxins in the air, as I discussed in my previous video. And if you go to the Simon Dan video that I talked about, if you actually go to that video, you actually go down and you start searching the comment section of that video, you will see that I absolutely destroy a lot of the atheists there, because the ones that came and viewed my video were like, you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, obviously you're not bringing any other scientific evidence other than to just say that I'm wrong. And here's why I could be right. And, people don't understand that space is about as cold as we can get to absolute zero. And if there was, at some point, a canopy of ice around the Earth at 10 miles up, let's say, which would be about 52,800 feet, about 53,000 feet, you would have seen you would see it as, it would almost be like it would have let, but it would have been like a greenhouse. It would have let the right amount of light and everything in for, things to respire on Earth, plants to be able to, go through their stuff, and for other things to happen that way. So for me, when I see somebody like this, talking about, well, Noah was 500 years old. How could he be 500 years old? Adam lived 900. Now you'll notice that most of them, it says they lived a certain amount and then they died. When did they die? The flood. They didn't die of natural causes. In fact, I think the only one that actually died of natural causes may have been Adam, because I think he lived like 930 years. Okay, and then if you add it all up, you actually start to see that if you actually look at a biblical timeline, you'll actually see that it goes to a certain point and then it stops, and that's right when the flood happens. Okay, so it makes sense that if, and then you'll see that once that happens, the people's lifespans went from 900 years down to 80 within about 3 or 4 generations. And so if you start to really analyze that part of the Bible, you'll see that what this guy's talking about is absolutely just made up in his mind, of saying, oh, well, that doesn't sound plausible in my mind, And I don't know when Noah got married, okay? I don't know. It says that he had 3 sons. I choose to believe that he had 3 sons, okay? So I don't know if he had maybe his father had been bringing him up, that, it's like he was going to be the one that was going to, because, his father was saying, oh, he's the one that's going to end the Lord's curse. He might not have wanted to have sons because of something that he might have been afraid of something happening. And when it happened, that he finally got married and he had 3 sons, and those 3 sons were able to live a certain length of time, and they got married. However long that was, we don't know. Okay? Just says that when he was 500, he had 3 sons. Okay? And it says that when he was 601, so I would imagine that his sons lived for a while. So, it just... Let me see here. Is it? Let me see here. Nice to dove. Let's see whether the waters had subsided from the surface of the land. I know he's square foot. We came back to him. Yeah, so it says, by the first day of the first month of the 601st year of Noah's life, the waters dried off the earth. So, if Noah had... So, his sons would have been 100 years old. Okay, because he had them at 500, so they would have been 101 years old when the end of the flood. Okay? And we know that because when Shem... let me see, Shem... Yeah. Shem was the ancestors of the Hebrews. I don't know if it says how long he lived. It doesn't. It just says that they did that. So, anyway. But yeah. So, that was kind of the thing is... Yeah, they did that. So, so it doesn't say how long that Shem lived after. I know that there's like a timeline where they know about how long it was from the flood to like the end of the Babylonian exile, which was the 400 years of silence, and they can kind of like trace it back, and so they know about how long certain people lived, and they can go back. I mean, there's biblical scholars that can sit down and paint you maps of this stuff, and I don't know all of that, but I just know that's how they do that. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, I really think this guy is stretching to try to come up with anything to say I don't want to believe in the Bible. Just his right. Okay, I'm just refuting it from a place of, if you're going to say that one thing in the Bible is wrong, then you might as well just go ahead and become an atheist and just say everything in the Bible is wrong. Because either the scripture is God-breathed or it's not.
Hearing that of someone I respected so much made me realise that if I was going to keep any sort of faith in this story being real, I was going to have to reach new levels of mental gymnastics. Because from this point on, the story just gets even more difficult to rationalise with reality. Assuming that there were roughly the same number of species at the time of the flood as to today, the total figure for the number of animals on board the Ark would stand at approximately 2.065 million. Online I saw different Christian denominations debate whether insects would have been on board the Ark or not, but none of them provided a valid explanation as to how these 1 million species of insects would survive without land, food, or fresh water. In fact, just through using the Bible alone, we realise that they must have been on board the Ark. You would have thought that a global flood would have provided the perfect opportunity for Jehovah, a God of love, kindness, and empathy, to eradicate insects such as mosquitoes, fleas, and ticks. In the thousands of years after the flood, Jehovah, using his foreknowledge, would have seen that billions of human lives would be ended by diseases spread by mosquitoes alone, making them the world's most deadly animal. But we can't judge. Jehovah knows everything. It must have been a wise decision to take them on board.
Well, they're not just... Mosquitoes are not just there to spread diseases. Mosquitoes are a valid part of the ecosystem. Yes, they're a pest. Yes, they're a menace. But so are spiders. So are praying mantises. There's a lot of pests and insects out there. I mean, why didn't God just get rid of cicadas then? Locusts, you know. That kind of stuff. Grasshoppers. Because they're an integral part of the ecosystem. We've actually found that a lot of these animals, a lot of these insects exist for various reasons. And if we didn't have them around, our ecosystem would collapse. It's like when you watch that little, it's like when you put together those food webs in science class, and they say, now if you remove one part of this food web, what happens to the rest of the food web? It might adjust, then again it might not. It might actually collapse because certain ones above it might not, because they can't, like, let's say for instance, eagles eat snakes and snakes eat mice. If there were no mice around, then what would the snakes eat? And if there were no snakes around, then what would the eagles eat, or hawks or whatever eat? So you see what I'm saying? Like, there's an interdependency there. Okay? And I'm not saying that every single thing is there, but I think that, like, mosquitoes carrying pathogens is a byproduct of the fall. It has nothing to do with the original intention of what a mosquito is supposed to be, is supposed to do in the ecosystem. It's a byproduct of that, because it could take something from someone and go and spread it to a different person. It can take something from an animal and it injects it into you, and you do that. You could easily say the same thing about rats. Why would God have spared rats? Well, because, they're an integral part of the ecosystem. But rats spread things like the plague, and rats spread, different things. Well, yeah. But the funny thing is, we survived the plague. It's now making a comeback because we're allowing homeless people to defecate in the streets, and the rats are starting to multiply to the point where they are eating the feces, and the bubonic plague is making a comeback because of that. Because they're coming up and biting the homeless after eating the homeless feces, and then they're spreading diseases. But, they're an integral part of, different species. So, it's like this guy has never studied science before in biology and understood food webs and how things go together. So, we'll keep going on here.
2.065 million is a figure that to many Christians sounds far too high. But bear in mind that that figure doesn't include the thousands of species that have gone extinct between the Ark finishing its voyage to today, and the fact that Noah was actually instructed by God to take 7 of many species and not 2. If the Genesis story is correct, when it says that they boarded on that very day, the animals would have had to board the Ark at the rate of 50 per second. Even without insects, Noah would have still needed to board the animals at a rate of 3.
Well, just because he said that they boarded that day doesn't necessarily mean that they were all on board by the end of that day. Okay? It means that they were boarding, they started boarding that day, and by the 7th day they were done, and God closed up the hatch, and then the rains came, and the waters burst forth. So, this right here is stupid. Okay? It is absolutely idiotic, because it's not even true. see here. Covenant, you shall have the ark, accompanied by your sons. Take with you some kind of edible food. And so Noah did. The Lord said to Noah, enter the ark with all your household, for you alone are the present age I have found righteous. Of all clean animals you are to take in 7 pairs, male and its mate, blah blah blah. For in 7 days' time. Yeah, so let me just back this up just a teensy-weensy bit here, because I just wanted to see what he was looking at. 11. I think what that means is, I think this guy's kind of conflating what it meant by on that very day. And I think what that means is that it says they went in with every wild animal according to its kind. So I think, because what it says is that it says, enter the ark with all your household, for you alone are the present age. This is 7:1. I have found righteous. Of all clean animals you are to take 7 pairs, male with its mate, but of the animals that are not clean, a pair, a male with its mate. Likewise, of the birds of the air, 7 pairs, a male and a female, to keep their kind alive all over the earth. 4. For in 7 days' time I am going to make it rain for 40 days and nights on the earth, to blot off the face of the earth every living thing that I have made. And then in verse 7 it says, Noah went with his sons, his wife, his sons' wives, went into the ark to escape the waters of the flood, of the clean animals, and of those that were not clean, of the birds, and of all the reptiles, a pair of each, a male and a female, joined Noah in the ark, as God had commanded Noah. As God had commanded Noah. And so what they're saying here is, in verse 11, it says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the 2nd month, on that very day, the fountains of the great abyss were all broken open, and the windows of the heavens were opened. The rain fell on the earth for 40 days and nights. That same day, Noah with Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons accompanying them, went into the ark together. It says, went into the ark together with all the various kinds of wild beasts, all the various kinds of domestic animals, all the various kinds of land reptiles, and all the various kinds of birds, everything with feathers and wings of all creatures in which there was the breath of life. A pair of each joined Noah in the ark. And so I don't think that they all went in on that one day. I think what it was is that the Lord said, look, in a week I'm going to destroy the earth, and I want you to go and gather up all these animals. And so I think Noah put all of those animals on the ark in those 7 days. And on that 7th day, okay, in verse 11 there, on that day, all the springs of the vast watery deep burst open, and the floodgates of heaven were opened. On that very day, Noah went into the ark along with his son and his wife and his wife's sons. They went in with. So, they were already on. They went in with. Not, they took in with them. It says they went in with. It's language, dude. Come on. Think about this for a minute. Alright, let's get back at this. So just ignore this part.
At the rate of 50 per second. Even without insects, Noah would have still needed to board the animals at a rate of 3 every 2 seconds. Unless Jehovah provided a high-speed conveyor belt to help the animals along onto the ark, this would have been impossible. But using that figure of 2.065 million, I was rather dubious as to whether all these animals would have even been able to fit on board the ark. And after doing the necessary calculations, let's just say that the animals would have become very familiar with each other. But I was forgetting one very important factor. Noah was instructed to collect and take enough food to last his family and every single animal on board for a time period which lasted over a year. Mr. and Mrs. Elephant require on average 600 pounds of food between them each day. That's the same weight as a 5x5 round bale of hay. They would therefore have required the equivalent weight in food of 370 bales of hay during the trip. That's around 222,000 pounds. In reality, Noah's Ark would have been nothing more than an enormous storage container to house the food for the animals. If they wanted to begin boarding animals, they'd have had to spend another 50 years building Noah's Ark II, Noah's Ark's sister ship. When I considered this point, it impacted the story of Noah's Ark the same way an iceberg impacted the story of the Titanic. But with those who are so determined to believe it, such as Christians, where there's a will to make something believable, there's a way to make something believable.
Alright, so we're going to end this video segment here, because I'm kind of running up around the 40-minute mark now. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about his thing here. It didn't say that Noah took adult animals on the ark. Makes you think, doesn't it? How much would a baby elephant eat? Because one of the things that they found is that in weight requirements, you wouldn't have wanted to take an adult full-grown elephant. We always see cutesy little books, children's books of Noah's Ark, and it's got, all the lions and the little tigers and the little, bears and the elephants with their heads sticking out of the ark and out of all the windows bobbing along on the sea. But it was very interesting because if you go to Ken Ham's Ark project in the U.S., you'll actually see that a lot of space would have been saved if he had taken juvenile animals on the ark, which it's actually looking more likely that that's probably what he did. Because, if they'd had enough food and water to last about a year, okay, then they would have had smaller animals, okay? And that would have included salted meats, that would have included grains, that would have included various different things. And he's actually got it all compartmentalized. If you actually go to the Ark project and you actually walk all of the decks, he's actually got it laid out in such a way that when you start walking through, you start understanding just how ingenious the design of the Ark actually is. Now, a lot of people yell and scream and carry on about the Ark project. Oh, ha, 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 Ken Ham didn't build it. Ken Ham didn't build it to float. He doesn't have to survive a flood, you morons. Okay? He didn't build that thing. He built it to show that a person could build it. He didn't build it to show that it was completely seaworthy or that, it was all this other stuff, okay? That's not what he was out to do. He was out to just show that this is the actual size of the ark. And there have been so many people that were like, oh, well, if Ken Ham and all of his, modern engineers and architects and stuff, couldn't decide on how to build it and make it seaworthy, then I don't understand how an old guy could. It's fairly simple. God told him exactly how to build it. And, honestly, it was never meant to, like I said before, it's not a sailing ship. It was never meant to go anywhere. It was just meant to be there. And it was just meant to bob along in the water until the waters receded. That was it. Okay? That was the only purpose of the ark. So, the more that people attempt to debunk this kind of thing, the more they end up looking the fool. Because they just don't understand the logistics of something like this, and they don't really apply any logic to it. because they don't want to, number one, and number two, they're so in a hurry to make fun of it that they don't really apply any logical thinking to it to see if it could be possible. They just go, oh, well, like 2 fully grown elephants, they eat like 600 pounds of food a day. So there was like a year, they would have needed 220,000 pounds of food. Who said they took adults on there? You're assuming he took adults on the Ark. Whereas a juvenile elephant doesn't eat 600 pounds of food a day. And where there wasn't any like space for the cages for the animals, the rest of that would have been stocked with food. The entire Ark. Okay? So like I said, I'll put some stuff down in the descriptions and, take a look at them, see what you think, and I'll see you on the next one. I'm trying to get through these as fast as possible, but sometimes it's hard because it's like I have to try to express exactly how all of this stuff doesn't work. And it's like, oh my gosh, this guy just really does not understand anything. And we're going to start getting more into biology on this one, and, it's going to blow your mind even worse. Okay? So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.